Um, well, I suppose one of the things that has changed in, say, the 15 years that I've been involved in that type of work is that artists aren't as sceptical of working in non-gallery, non-museum contexts, I believe. I think that with the emergence of a lot of, if you like, classically definable public art, abstract pieces of work in traditional materials, stone, wood, bronze, in the 70s and the 80s, and then the beginnings of the Percent for Art scheme. I think that started in 1987. There was a kind of an influx of that type of work, or a huge proliferation of it throughout the cities, really, and then increasingly on the sort of the highways and byways, the motorways, in fire stations and all the rest. And it acquired a very bad name for itself. And in fact, for many years I wouldn't use the term public art because it stigmatized. It was an inherently sort of bad term as far as I was concerned, because it was sort of a code for. Another word that was used at the time was plop art, but art that could be put anywhere, out of just taking a maquette off a shelf and reproduced on a greater scale. So, for example, when I was working in South Dublin County Council on, I think it was in Context 2, this sort of new approach to commissioning was vindicated when Paul Seawright, for example, applied for a commission. And at the same time, Paul was very much a gallery museum artist and had a show coming up in the Douglas Hyde Gallery and whatever. And this endorsed what we were doing there, if you like, that there was this very internationally renowned artist who, typically really only show in museums, but he did a really interesting piece of work which actually opened up a lot of avenues of inquiry and criticism for me as well about how to approach that type of commissioning. And at the same time, I guess the Glen Dimplex commissions were happening through the city, and Dorothy posted Ghost Ship, and the project was doing off-site projects. So that all kind of contributed to the quality of working in public spaces and being asked to work in a particular context. If there is to be a brief, and if there are particular requirements that the commissioning body wants delivered through the commission, then that has to be made explicit. There is no point in concealing any sort of requirements that are held within the sort of the financing body's sort of expectations for what the work is going to do. So if an artist is to be absolutely instrumentalised in order to make a work that delivers some part of the objective of the commissioning body, well, that should be made explicit. For my own part, unless I felt comfortable working in that way, I wouldn't develop a brief for that type of client unless I believed in why an artist was being asked to deliver a piece of work under those circumstances. So sometimes I have had to not work with, obviously you have to decide as a curator or as a commissioner at what point you're prepared to go in delivering a client's kind of requirements. And I find it's best if you can convince the client, the commissioning body, to kind of abandon the idea of a brief within reason. Obviously there have to be some kind of immutable points, like there's some sort of a deadline, that there's some sort of a budget. There are health and safety issues that have to be taken into consideration. There would be obviously matters of sensitivity to the constituent community. However, issue-based work and critical work, or work that is uneasy or very difficult work, is often the most interesting work, as we know, and therefore it has to be accommodated, or it has to be resourced as well. So one has to establish as a commissioner / curator whether the client has a reluctance to work with certain types of artists or to allow certain kinds of work to be made, and that's very important to find out in the first place as well. So there's a place, I suppose, for everything, but I think what I find interesting is to, as I say, abandon the idea of a particular brief and to work with a group of artists from the outset, and then whittle that down to whichever artist is eventually going to be commissioned, and then to work with that artist to come up with a project. I think, no more than putting on an exhibition, curating an exhibition, editing a book or whatever, the relationship, the partnership that you build, the relationship you build with the artist is essential. So the kind of idea of a brief being written and being distributed, and then artists sort of proposing ideas, and then that artist never being met before the award is commissioned or the commission is awarded, I find a little bit anachronistic. I think I don't believe in such a thing as a public art practice. So I don't believe that there are a category of artists out there who only do public art, and if there are, I'm not really interested in working with them. I think there are people who work as artists, and they increasingly work in a myriad of ways. So they work on commissions, they work in galleries, they work on the web, they have commercially paid jobs, and they teach, whatever. So part of their practice is maybe working with a curator on a commission. So and that to me, that's the way to look at it. And I have had I suppose the opportunity and the privilege and the great advantage of being able to work over sustained prolonged periods of time where artists are appointed and they're guaranteed that they're going to get a commission. But then we thrash out, the artist and myself, what they're going to do. And because I've worked with a lot of artists, I can sort of maybe flag problems that might occur, or sometimes it happens that I have to indicate that a project very similar to that is happening somewhere else, or somebody's done it already, or whatever, and one has to be very sensitive how one phrases things like that. But that's part of my job. So any of the projects that I work on, I want those projects to be the project that the artist is most engaged in at that time when they are working. So there's a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion. We might talk about what we're reading, what exhibitions we've been looking at. So it's no different really to curating an exhibition. And the point of artists being sort of appropriated by a commissioning program and being instrumentalized or used in order to deliver the objectives of the company that's funding the project, of course is a valid point. But I don't think that it differs that much to an artist working in IMA or an artist working for a private gallery or whatever. So if you're prepared to sign up, if you like, to working in a particular context, a particular community, well then in a sense you are allowing yourself to be appropriated by that context. And I don't see a particular problem with that, unless you're uneasy yourself and you have some sort of moral or political dispute with the community that you're working with, or the context within which you're working. Well, then you know that you shouldn't be working there in the first place. But if you don't, if you actually believe that the intention of the commissioning program is in keeping with your own intellectual pursuits, well then it's a coming together of minds, and it's a delivering together of certain visions or aspirations or whatever. So I think that whole term that has acquired a bad name, instrumentalization, actually is a very complex issue, and I don't think it can be disregarded or written off as something that's inherently nasty.